I have now clicked go live. I'm a good boy. I'm going to tell you when we click go live.
You missed it. You missed it. It was great.
No, I didn't miss it. Sorry, guys. You missed it. Can everybody hear us?
Not here. You're kind of loud on my machine.
Well, Jan can hear me. I'm very loud, apparently. Can you hear me? And more importantly, can you hear Jan? Because you're this way today.
I'm the important one.
Something like that, anyway. But we can roll.
Hello, everybody.
Fantastic. So I'll just get confirmation that people can hear us and that we're live, and I can say hello. And then we'll go. I've actually prepared a little idea of what we can run through today, which makes a change. Hello, Roderick. Hi, Melicon.
I've forgotten it all.
That's fine. I can MC.
How's the volumes? This is my computer graphic for volumes.
If you say something interesting.
Say something, I'm
they're good.
Up on you.
Better than standard. Nice. That makes a change. It's almost like after doing a couple of years of this, we're getting better at it. Fantastic. All right. So we want to start off today with so I had a question earlier on today about the Godot 4 action RPG. And from that, we're going to give you a quick update as to where we are with certain things in it. First of all, the music side is done and launched. If you've got access to that, you'll find it under your library. It's called Making Music for Beginners. I think that's the name. And yeah, that'll be there for you already if you bought it. Whether or not you were an early access or normal access, it's there. And then the Blender side of things. So before I go on to that, the question on the Discord was, when will I get access to the 3 courses? And just to, I suppose, go over it again, that whilst it's 3 pathways rather than 3 courses, so the Blender and the Godot are likely to be separated into smaller courses, more digestible, and also more accessible to people who perhaps don't want to learn about absolutely everything into one chunk. We thought it best to be able to break it down, also meaning that we can deliver the content much easier as well as these modules. Currently,
just to say, when we say pathways, it's kind of the language we use internally because it's a nice image. Think of it as a bunch of smaller courses, and they're in 3 categories. So if you bought just the Blender one, you get all the Blender courses. Those count as one, but they're not being released as one giant course. They're being released as individual courses.
Much like we've taken the decision when releasing our content on the courses to the early access people, you'll be getting a chunk at a time. So you'll get a section at a time rather than it dripping out. So we've had feedback that most people prefer it that way, so they can just sit down and start that section rather than starting and stopping, go through, which makes sense.
So that also means if you want to learn some bits but you don't much care about the others, you don't have to.
Yeah, I am on the right.
Weren't you always on the right?
No, I have switched it around. Adam, our editor, noticed that I'd moved to the other side. But it's so when I'm looking this way at my second monitor, when I'm talking to you, it looks like I'm actually talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
I wish you'd put pants on.
Nice.
Welcome. So, yeah, it's... you've got the itinerary, so I should probably follow your lead. I was going to dive into the next topic, but I want to make sure which one it is.
I was going to say procedural weapons, which is what I'm working on at the moment. First couple of sections are live, and at the moment, I'm working on, well, they're almost in editing at the moment, so that we've got Python as like the 3rd section, and then we're going to do a more... I want to say word extreme, but it's not really extreme. It's a few more parts, making a more complex model and using procedural nodes, geometry nodes procedurally in order to generate those weapons. And what I've realized this week, because 3.1, Blender 3.1 came out this week, and there are additional nodes and additional functionality, which is actually going to be really useful. So there's going to be some updates in the back sections just to give you that extra bit of knowledge, basically.
Yep. And once it's all done, I believe the plan, I've got the word there, is that you can use the code you've got, make a bunch of extra assets, and use that to generate the asset pack. So the modular weapon asset pack, if you bought the asset pack, or if you're waiting for it to be live, that's what the backbone is for.
One thing that I noticed midway through was that the origin point actually caught me out earlier on, but it was a great learning journey as well. So whilst the two objects on an axe themselves, in order to procedurally generate them, you have to have something to say these two things need to be in the same place. And I made, for some reason, I made the choice to just leave it down at the bottom of the handle of the axe, and then when I added a longer axe handle, it just got longer above the axe head. But it was at the same time, it was a great teaching point to know that you can screw up and still fix it later, which is really interesting when it comes to the Python stuff. Because when it comes to coding and trying to work out a particular journey, there is no one journey. And I realized that rather than actually go into a deep dive on this particular Python, we'd actually take a small journey with it as well. We're going to make a deliberate mistake during the journey and then come back again from it. Because when you're coding, a lot of the time it's about that experimentation and going, actually, this flow that I thought would work doesn't actually work. And then we flip it around, which is... Which I think is much more beneficial than just saying, oh, this is exactly the right code to use. Because especially with Blender Python, a lot of the resources are now out of date because the Blender API changes quite significantly. And also the way that you access the code isn't always available. And I'm sure you guys have had this as well. When you're new to a particular subject and you're trying to find out what to do, you don't have the vocabulary to actually ask the proper question. Do you ever find that?
Yeah, all the time. Especially when you're, I find one of the most difficult things for people starting Godot is how do you know that this has this property? Like, how do you know that's what it's called? And so just knowing you can go to the inspector and mouse over it and learn it that way. Just little things like that aren't immediately obvious for everybody.
There was parts. Was this last week or the week before? I can't remember. But I was asking Jan, have a look at this bit of code, and then we got stuck on one particular part, and I'd completely forgotten the fact that you could right-click on any of the fields once you've got. And Python tooltips, you can turn that on as well. But if you right-click on a field, you can just copy its full path. It's like, oh, that would have saved us about half an hour of Googling and looking at the Blender API trying to work out what it was.
I had a fun thing while recording today, in fact, where I had to go back and redo about 10 minutes worth of video because I'd put in a collision polygon 2D and not a polygon 2D. And those things aren't the same. So that was my wasting a lot of time. Actually, today I think we're going to cover this later in the itinerary. I've had quite a stop again, start again, stop again, start again kind of a day.
Yes, we'll come back to that later.
Yeah.
So yeah, procedural weapons is in progress. My personal goal is to get that out by the end of the month for all early access people. All of the content is hopefully going to be there. And whilst I'm thinking about the rest of the month, I know there won't be this next week. I'm actually away. And
just so you know, when he says this, he means the live stream.
Yes.
He doesn't just mean like, that handsome Michael over there.
Hi. This.
Yeah. It won't be all of this.
Yeah. So just to segue just a little bit from that, we had booked this little break over 2 years ago. And then something happened and it just kept getting shifted. I personally, I'd actually rather not take it next week, but it's either that or lose it. So I'm going to use it. All right. Godot 4. How are we doing with Godot 4 at the moment?
I'm confused about left and right still. Godot 4 Alpha 4 came out last week. We didn't have a live stream last week, so we couldn't talk about it. And it was a lot of little behind the scenes changes, performance changes, and some Vulkan bugs. Although we've not yet seen a fix of the transparency issue that Mikey's been getting.
Yep, and we even tried that on another one of my computers, and we were still getting the
Yep. Actually, before we go into that, I was about to mention this, but G Castro does ask, For those of us who aren't in the early access, when do we get access to that content? Last I heard, and Mikey's probably the best person to answer this, but he's been talking a lot, so I think it's my turn. Last I heard, we're still on track for, I think, 2 weeks as a rough estimate, to like open the course up for everyone else.
Well, once it's there for the early access people, then it gets basically released. Once it's complete, basically, it gets
We
released.
didn't say like when's it out. So yeah, we're thinking the end of the month.
Yeah. End
but,
of the month.
You know, soon TM. Like as soon as we can, while keeping the quality good. But yeah, Godot 4. A little cautionary tale. It is still it's very good. It's pretty stable considering, but it is in alpha. It is not ready for live projects. And one example of this is they renamed a resource type. They renamed texture to texture 2D to keep it, I'm guessing, to keep it consistent with everything else, which is fine, but it meant that the RPG wouldn't load. Because every single texture on every particle, on every mesh, on everything wasn't there. So I had to do some changes and re-import everything and check the code and do the rest of it. And now it works okay. But that was a good 20 minutes of just messing around to get, you know, where we are now.
You definitely know when textures are missing in Blender because everything goes bright magenta.
Oh, no, it wasn't even doing that. It was just saying fail to load scene.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'd read the patch notes, so I knew that was coming from. But just be aware, Godot 4 is great. I recommend playing with it. It's looking really good. It crashes. It's got bugs guaranteed. Like they're telling you, it's not ready yet. We know about a bunch of bugs. So by all means, play with it. Don't use it yet for a live project. Don't convert an existing project to Godot 4 if you, A, don't have a backup of it, or B, care about being able to work with it. Because once you've converted it to Godot 4, you can't convert it back easily. Like it's a pain. That said, it's looking really good, and there's a lot of, you know, work being done on it. I've not been playing with it extensively this week for reasons we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, it's looking lovely. I'm actually at the stage where I'm waiting for the modular weapons to come in, so I can start playing with that in Godot 4 and actually getting those looking really good. In the UI, which is going to be the really tricky bit, in the inventory system, which I'm not bothering to make until we have, you know, something to put in it, and in the real world, both being held and dropped on the floor.
Yeah.
So yeah, Godot 4 is looking great. I also did some playing around with tile maps. I'm struggling with the tile map interface. I will say this now. It's very powerful. I mean, much more so than where it used to be. Terrains is the new auto tile. But the way it's laid out, I don't yet find intuitive. So I don't know if that's being changed or not, or if it's just going to be me getting used to it. I wanted to make a video on, and I probably still will, on Navigation Agent 2Ds, because we did a Navigation Agent 3D video. But getting the tile map to actually like flow easily, like I could just say, here's a level I made earlier, but that's not a very interesting video. Getting that to actually work is a little bit of a pain, and I'm taking some shortcuts and things. It's working, it looks okay, but the actual journey to get there, I'm finding a little bit tricky. As an example, you make your tile map. Should I show them this?
Yeah, that'll be good. Just to refresh my memory, and maybe some people out there, the tile map is the 2D version of a grid map.
Yes, or if you prefer, the grid map is the
3D version of the tile map.
Yeah.
So it's not called. I mean, they might go ahead and rename it Grid Map 3D.
No, they might call it Tile Map 3D.
Tile Map 3D. There we go.
Let me share my screen.
Let me switch to your screen. Are you sharing your screen to? Oh, it's gone all dark. There we go. Now? Yeah, it's appeared.
And you can still hear me.
I can still hear you.
Wonderful. Okay, so here is the thing. My video is slowing down. There we go. So if I run this, we have a very simple little 2D demo, moving block, 2-key, maze, click to move. And he'll get here, and oh no, there's a block. Help, help, help. Not quite ready for prime time. As you can see, it's not checking. All that's fine. But when you go to make your tile map, you have your tile set. Let's actually make a brand new tile map and see what that looks like. So let's go no 2D. I'm going to bring in a tile map. And it says here, The editor tile map node has no tileset resource. Okay, so I'll go to here, new tileset. The tile map's tileset has no source configured. Enter the tileset resource to add one. This is the bit that throws me. Well, this is the start of what throws me. And Play with Furcifer did a lovely video on this. I spent 5 minutes looking here. I clicked on tile source. I said no resource. It's click here, click here. It's here.
Wow.
And then once you're here and you make this big, you have to bring them in. This starts getting a little bit fiddly. So, I mean, it's fine. It's just, I don't know that I'm comfortable with it yet, or if it's still in development. So I don't want to badmouth it, but we go in here. Let's say I want to edit this white tile. Can't. But if I click on this arrow button, now I can click it. And then I can go to patterns and then go to terrains. And then I can go to tile set. And then I can edit this. Oh, wait, no, I can't. I've got to click on this button and go over here. And finally, here's the navigation layer. So it's just remembering, you know, there's a difference between tile map and tile set. And if you want to actually select thing, you must have the select thing, select tiles icon done. There's a lot of backwards and forwards, which I don't think is quite there yet. So that's my little journey to tile sets. It is still very much in development. Yep. I suspect the interface is going to get another pass. I don't know that for a fact. If it isn't, it's not the end of the world. No. But yeah, I've been trying to get comfortable with that because it's very hard to teach something that, you know,
well, if it's changing,
you're recording yourself going, wait, what? Why would you put that? Huh? It's entertaining. It's not educational.
I remember that during the transition from Blender 2.79 to 2.8 when there was a big UI change, and I was sat there and I was just going through the motions like I would have done in Blender 2.79, and it turned out to be completely different. And
I will point out, by the way, this is in development, and Roderick's saying this is a terrible way to edit. It's also possible that I'm missing something. Like, I am teaching myself by jumping in there and playing with it. I might have messed up somewhere. There might be a really slick way of doing that, or there's a slick way coming, or I'm an idiot, which is also possible.
We've all had those moments where the button you're looking for is clearly labeled, and you just don't see it. You see everything around it, but not the button you want.
Yep. It's like when you stick an any key on someone's keyboard.
Press any key. Yes.
So yeah, Godot 4 is looking good. I'm really happy with it. I mean, the visuals are fantastic. The new nodes are great. There's still work being done. It's not in feature freeze. Like the work is incredible and ongoing. So don't judge the final by what it is here. Play with it by all means. Report bugs.
Yeah.
We want to report the transparency bug that we're having. We're just trying to figure out the best way of doing it because I don't have it on my machine. And Mikey doesn't have enough knowledge of Godot 4 to make the same bug on purpose. So
what we're thinking at the moment,
send it to Mikey, but we both have an hour to play around and say, hey, is this it? And then send that off.
Yeah, we're pretty sure that at the moment that anybody using an NVIDIA card, and maybe it's NVIDIA and Windows 11 equals this particular problem.
I'm not sure of anything. I think it might be you.
Yes, it might
personally.
Be. Yes, I have this aura. Although I went to go help someone out with their computer the other day. I sat down and they were just like, it's just not booting. So I pushed the on button and it went, hi, log in. I was like,
I mean, I've told you my favorite one back when I was working in a window cleaning company in London in 2002 or so. And I was in charge of booking clients. I was in charge of sending the schedule to each cleaning team. And I was in charge of the IT because I was the person with the most computer experience. And that had the computers in there since about 1999. They were cathode ray monitors. They were old. I was like, you need to upgrade this. Like, I will move your entire business to Microsoft Access in this case. Like, I'll make a database of all your clients and a booking system so it's all automated, but you need machines that can run it. So they bought new machines, but they ordered them to arrive on the day that I had off. And I went, it's fine. Just wait till I come in the next day. No, we can plug them in. How do you do it? Which is a great sentence. I said, If you really want to plug them in, you can. Every plug can only go in one place, so don't worry too much about it. Fine. I get a call the next day. Jan, you've got to come in. What do you mean I've got to come in? You ordered a bunch of broken computers. Get on the bus all the way across London, get to Ladbroke Grove, get into the office. None of the computers are turning on. Did you plug these in correctly? Yeah, you said they could only go. So I look, and they've plugged the power, the power plug into the extension bar, and then the extension bar into itself.
That's painful. Can we get an F in chat for that company?
What? Why did you say they'd only plug in one place? You didn't say I'd plug it into the wall.
It's a perpetual power machine. Oh, perfect.
So yeah, that was my favorite. It's not as good as the my foot pedal's not working, but it's up there.
My foot pedal's not. Yes.
I knew somebody who worked in IT in like 2000, and he got a call from someone at the time in secretarial. And my foot pedal's not working. And he went and she had a mouse on the floor and was stepping on it.
It's not a sewing machine.
I think she thought it was the control, because on in old secretarial pools, they used to have an audio dictator.
Oh, right. Yes.
And you control that with a pedal while typing on a typewriter, so you didn't have to take your hands off it because you go forwards, backwards.
Nice. Okay.
Hello, Gerard. Oh, and hello, respect the conglomerate. I don't know which conglomerate I'm respecting. They might have to earn that respect. I don't know. For fusion-powered PCs.
Why not? What could possibly go wrong if there was nuclear fusion inside?
Fellow gamers, please press F to share respects. So yeah, I think that's what's next on the itinerary agenda.
Upcoming. So we've already talked about Godot 4, as in using it now, and there's going to be almost to go back to an earlier question. When will the Godot 4 content come out? And it's as simple as when it is stable. And it won't appear immediately.
When it is stable, we can start working on the product.
Yes.
Right. So right now, it's not quite there.
Yeah.
Once it's in feature freeze, it's getting closer. Like the beginning of beta is not necessarily, although it might be the beginning of recording. But once it's there, we can start assessing. But the moment we can get you a course that we're comfortable won't radically have to be redone the moment it goes to, release state, then we will.
So we've got the asset packs as well that are part of the action RPG. Those are in production. They're constantly in production because there's quite a few different ones to make. And one of the issues we've got at the moment is, again, Godot 4 being stable. So those are going to be assets that we can get ready much quicker than courses, because once we can actually import it and set up materials and things like that without Godot crashing, then it'll be something we can actually go through and do. Because our ultimate goal with the asset packs is for Godot users, obviously you'll get the GLTF files and we might export them more universally as an OBJ or something along those lines. But also in Godot, we want you to be able to just pick up and use the resources. So many times we've had the issue where we've used third-party resources and the origin is in the wrong place. So you have to do a load of editing to get things sorted. Not just origin, but other things as well. You end up with them not lining up if you're using them in a grid map and other things like that. So our goal is that you can just bring them in.
Vegas Era.
Good evening.
Speaking of upcoming, should we talk about what I've been working on?
Yes. Yeah. Are you going to share your screen?
Boop. That's my new course image. Do you like my new course image?
I need to share your screen. They won't see it otherwise. Ta-da! So we had a bit of a preview about this, didn't we? Like, must have been like 2 months ago. A few months
back, I worked on the prototype, and I've started now working on the mini course. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because everything is going frozeled. There we go. So for those of you who don't know, that is a course image for Tookie Bubble. Tookie Bubble being a little pixelated puzzle game inspired by Puzzle Bobble, a puzzle game from the 90s, which I really enjoyed and had way too many hours in. And we have a little prototype, and I'm going to make that available for everybody soon. The lifetime members could already play it. The plan with this is, at the moment, I've finished the first section. I've started section 2. I was planning on getting section 2 done today, but I recorded 3 videos. I started editing them. I realized that this microphone was not being used. The webcam microphone was, and it sounded terrible. So I went back and started again. I got 1 video done, and then my landlord appeared in the building next door and started ripping out all the furniture and redoing the floors, which did need to happen. And I can't really be mad about that, but that was my stop again, start again day. And some of you might be thinking to yourself, but Jan, why are you working on this? You've got other things to work on. And there's 2 things I'd say to that. The first is that's a really weird thing to think to yourself. And the second thing is, we've been working quite a lot on the Godot 4 stuff, but until it's stable, it's very exploratory. So I can't actually produce content. And I want to get a mini course out for people who want to just play, just like we did with Zoo Blocks, just like we did with Tucanaban, which are little mini courses we have. It's a 3-4 hour course that you can just make a little simple game, learn a bunch of stuff. And in this course, we're going to be doing some fun things, especially playing a lot with set gets. Shall I bring up a copy of Tuki Bubble?
Yes, that'd be good to see what it is that we were just talking about.
Okay,
and here's a black screen. When Jan shares his screen, it will appear.
I'm waiting for Godot to open.
You're waiting for Godot?
I'm waiting for Godot. Bubbles, here we go. And you go over here. All right, sharing my screen.
3, 2, 1. Ta-da!
Okay. I'm also going to use my controller for this.
Okay, it's now visible.
And I don't think you've got the sound, have you?
I don't hear any sound, no.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to turn the music off. So let's start a new game with, how many colors should we do? 10 colors.
All the colors. Well, do you want to show? One of the things that we taught to you guys about as well on the stream at the time was that this isn't necessarily great for colorblind people. So we added in
colorblind mode.
Yes, we should pop the symbols in.
Symbols mode. There we go. So the idea is this is a match 3. So I've got a little triangle black one there. So I've got one here, the next one there, and away they go. So you want to match as many of these as possible. Bubbles will bounce off the side and stick to the roof and to other bubbles. Anytime you have a bubble that is, let me see if I can actually set one up. Yeah, we could do it right here. So this red bubble is being held up by this brown bubble. So if I can make this shot, extra points. And that's the game. Now, the original puzzle bubble, not bubble bubble, that was
a different game.
Platform game.
Yep.
Yep.
Man, I enjoyed that game.
Was a 1 or 2 player game with levels that got harder and harder. Every 10 shots, the entire thing will drop. And we have little panda friend next to us who is feeding us bubbles about as annoyingly as possible. There's a couple of other rules to know. Panda friend won't send out colors that are no longer on the screen. So if you manage to clear all the red ones off, for example, you don't have to see any more. And if you clear all of them, you win. And if they go below that black line, you don't.
There's some interesting things that are to learn during this, especially the one that stood out to me was the fact that this isn't a grid. This is everything's based on like a hexagon. Is that right?
Yes, we are using a tile map with an X offset on every other row. So we've made a little hex grid, which actually takes a little bit of code to make work, because when we're scanning neighboring bubbles to make sure do they match, we need to use a different set of values for what does neighboring mean every other row. So even rows and odd rows need different values for that. Also, the bubble here is a rigid body until it hits the tile map, at which point it gets deleted and turned into a tile until it's ready to be removed, at which case it gets deleted and turned into a particle. Oops, that's the wrong one. I messed it up. That was about to be a really good shot. I'm a baboon. So let's just pretend that didn't happen. And here's my particle. There we go. So we're doing quite a lot behind the scenes. And if we take a look at some of the stuff that's happening, let's go to scripts and let's go to, let's say, the level, right? So we're using a bunch of signals. We don't actually have what I was going to look at here. Let's go to bubbles. Here we go. We're using set gets, setters and getters. Each bubble has a type, which is its color, its symbol. And what's happening is when we send through a new value, so we say type equals 3, for example, that's going to go set get change color, which is now a function. So there's a function where I can define exactly what this means. In this case, I want the type to change, and I'm going to set the sprite frame to that. So there's a lot of little things we're doing so that we can use as few resources as possible. And when I say as few resources as possible, if I go to sprites, I think it is, and I scroll down to, where's my bubbles? Bubble sprite sheet. That sprite sheet is all of the bubbles. So every time you fire a bubble as a rigid body, every time it gets set as a cell, it's that one graphic, and we're using individual frames or individual regions to define rigid bodies or tile map values, respectively. So yeah, there's a lot going on here that we can learn. It's a fun little system. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now. Boop.
And we're back.
Didn't warn Mikey. Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, the plan is to get that out to our lifetime members. Probably by the end of this week. I want to get a little bit more stuff in there for them to get their teeth into. And then shortly after that to everyone else, because it's not going to be a very long course. There will probably be some things I need to re-record. But yeah, if you're wondering, hang on, if I kickstarted the early access pack, how come I'm not on there? Because this is not part of the Godot 4 Action RPG. So this is not in there. But yeah, so the lifetime members will get a quick early access thing because that's part of the lifetime promise.
Yep.
If you want to buy lifetime, by all means do so. You can go to www.canopy.games and click on lifetime and buy like 6 or 7 of them. It's fine. I don't mind.
I'm Michael, and I approve this statement.
I have bills to pay. But yeah, that's the plan. So it's a fun little system, and I'm really interested to see what people make with it. I enjoyed seeing how Tukey Bubble got changed around. For those of you who don't know Tukey Bubble, should I show Tukey Bubble?
Yes.
Okay. Not Tukey Bubble. Toucanaban.
Toucanaban. Okay. Yep. And then I've got after that, I'm just setting up at the moment to show off some Blender stuff that is also coming out soon. One of which is thank you to Melicon for asking the question about it. It's still work in progress, but we'll get back to that in a moment.
Sharing my screen. Okay, this is Toucanaban. I'm going to start a new game. It's a puzzle game. And the idea is to get these things. Wait, is this a new game? This isn't a new game. Start that one more time. That was continue. Why isn't it starting on level 1?
I don't know. Have you fiddled with the code?
I'll just do it from there. I might have fiddled with the code. Let's do options. It's fine. New game. All right, we'll go from here. So here we have a little box, and I want to get it onto this exit. And that's our game. And we start off with very simple levels. And they get more and more complicated with more and more mechanics. And it's just a fun little project to make. Like, I really enjoyed making this. One of the things I really enjoyed was seeing what a 7-year-old and her mother did, which is to replace the picture of Tukey with a little hand-painted picture she did. And I messed up this level, and I now can't complete it. So I have to press space to restart it. And that is Toucanaban. It's based on Sugarman, and I enjoy it. It's fun. You should play it. If you want to play it, by the way, you can go to our itch page, which we probably have a link to somewhere. I'm going to hide this window now. Boop.
And we're back.
So yeah, there's a couple of our mini courses, and I'll go find the itch page while Michael does his chatting.
Nice. So a couple of other things that are coming out. One is actually the Axe generator. We're going to make sure this comes out as not necessarily an add-on, but a script that you can use yourself as part of the RPG. It'll go on to our tools section on the website. I need to switch over to my screen, which I think will do that. Perfect. And so what we've got here is the script that's been written up the top here, and it will generate a series of axes for us. So we can come in and say how many axes we want. 200 was a funny example because I only have 3 axe heads and 3 handles at the moment, which makes it pretty much impossible to make 200 unique assets. But basically, you could make your own axe handles, you could make your own axe heads, making sure they're in the collection with their origins in the right place, which would be where you want those parts to join. You can simply come up to this. A suggestion was made to me that I make this available as something we can input outside of the script window, which is applied during the course itself. But for argument's sake here, if I make 300 and we pay attention over on the right-hand side, we've got our folder where all of this is kept. This script will automatically generate a GLB folder for us in this case. And yeah, it's done. We've now literally got 300 axes that if we had the right components for, we would actually have 300 unique axes all exported, which is absolutely brilliant. So that's going to be one. I'm going to tidy it up. I will have a look at making it into an actual add-on, so you can then install it into Blender as an add-on, rather than having to import a script and play around with that. Because simple problems can end up happening when you have basically when you end up having a script. Because if you came in here and inadvertently added some letters in by mistake, you could very easily just break the script and not know what you've done. So a button would be much better in that case.
We also had a wonderful thing the other day when I fell asleep in the middle of the afternoon, because that happens because I'm old. And Mikey sent me a message saying, "Take a look at this Python script. Does it look okay to you?" I'm like, I don't know. And I looked 5 minutes later. It was like, "Wait, did you just iterate that twice?" And he went, "Yeah, I just noticed that." So that was a good thing to wake up to. It's one of those little things where, as I like to tell people, coding feels very much like bargaining with an angry genie, in that you get exactly what you asked for, but not necessarily what you wanted. But the code looks great, and I'm really looking forward to, like, when you've got a few more like modular axes and swords and things, and we can just generate a crap ton of things. And we are also going to be doing that in Godot as part of the Godot 4 courses for the action RPG, because when those assets, like the individual blades and handles and hilts and everything else, are created, we want to, in our case, generate them at runtime in Godot rather than importing 300 different blades. So if you've got the Blender course, you can see how to generate them through the script. And if you've got the Godot course, you can see how to generate them at runtime in Godot. So you can decide what's best for your project.
That makes perfect sense. I'd also like to show off a thing that Melicon reached out and asked about. He was doing a lot of UV unwrapping. So last week I was out of the house, but took my laptop with me, and I ended up just playing around with it. He asked me in the middle of the day. I was like, "This is so much more exciting. I could put together this code than reading up about stuff." So if I just
my nose is itchy.
Switch back over to my screen, I have actually made this into an add-on as well, which is why I'm thinking about doing the same with... Oh, I've already installed it. Brilliant. So I've got my simple UV add-on here, and it's a very straightforward script, but it saves you a ton of time during the first stages of UV unwrapping. And I'm planning on breaking things out a little. At the moment, it basically uses a smart UV project, but I'm going to add far more options here under Simple UV, so you can change the resolution of the image you're using. So you can actually use a manual unwrap instead of an automatic unwrap as well, meaning you can go in. And actually, I think the automatic unwrap is coded out at the moment, and I'll test that in a second. So if we unwrap here and change... That was a great demonstration because the texture wasn't loaded in. So yeah, hot code, as Jan would normally say. Here we go. So it's already generated that UV map for us and put it in there straight away. And this is great if you're starting to do any type of modeling, but a great example of where you don't always want to do a... Oh, that would actually be an okay example. Let's add back in, this time pick a cylinder. So curved surfaces are notorious for being problematic when you're trying to unwrap them. So if we go ahead and unwrap this, you can see that if this was a texture, it'd be all over the place. I mean, size-wise, these are all really, really nice. They're all nice and even, but this is all over the place. So this is where you could come in manually and go, "Oh, let's just make this, let's select everything here and make this have no seams. It's interesting that it decided to do that this time round. And no bevel weight. Let's just try that again. I do like it when with live code. Now when we have a look at it, oh, it's yes. So I remember this is a bug that I've been trying to figure out for a while. So back to this one here. In edit mode, what I haven't done yet in my code is set this to edge select. That's something I actually need to do. This is the horrible mess that I was hoping to see without all the extra seams. So then you can come in manually afterwards, actually make a seam and just hit unwrap again. And everything is nice and neat. So I'm trying to speed up like the basic workflow rather than do anything super about it. And another bug here, of course, is it's generated a new material. It hasn't said, oh, is there already a material called UV map, etc. So those are other things that I'll probably want to look at squashing as bugs. But for a first pass, I'm really happy with how this has worked out. It also does a few extra bits and bobs at the moment. It adds bevels. So it's added 2 bevels because we ran it twice. It's not checking if there's already a bevel there. And it also, or it used to anyway, do some other things, but I turned those off. So yeah, this is an add-on that will be coming soon to just our store. And
very good.
Yeah, people can play with it to the heart's content. But I do need to do a few more bug squashing before I actually put it out there into the wild. Because I know at the moment I'm just going to get a load of people going, this is a problem, to which my response is, I know. Yep. So I want to make sure...
It is well spotted.
Yes. Yeah, I want to make sure it's any of those, yeah, I know that's a problem, to actually not be there before I go ahead. So I've got my own internal bug list at the moment, which is 4 or 5 major points long. But once that's sorted... So
it's looking very cool.
Yeah.
I like it. This is the first time I've seen it running live. I mean, he's described it to me, but I haven't actually seen it yet. So nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited about little tools like that. So I'm all for trying to speed up general workflow, not making things automated for the sake of them being automated, because that's a fool's errand, but actually being able to quickly go around your model and unwrap it, because usually the process would involve unwrapping the model, going to the image editor, creating a new image, apply. All of that can be done in script, and it's the same thing you do every time. So why not have a button that just does that basic thing? And I want to expose a couple of more parameters rather than it just be a button that says unwrap. You could say unwrap and use smart UV project or use manual UV. And if you use smart, expose the parameters for that, because you can change basically how it cuts up a particular model.
Totally. And hello, Anarch. Welcome.
Hello.
So yeah, that's looking good. Mikey, you are in charge of the itinerary schedule. What's next?
Itinerary schedule. Well, we've just shown off Simple UV and the Uber Axe generator. That's its official name. I don't know if that's acceptable, but I'm going to call it that anyway. So one of the things that, especially as it raised its ugly head to me this week, and we talked about it briefly before the stream, was how imposter syndrome can cause problems and delays and things like that.
Still worried if we're qualified to talk about imposter syndrome. Before the stream, I said that to Mikey, and he said, "You can make that joke during the stream. I don't mind." So I was like, "Oh well, thank you so much for your permission." So I thought I would, just to see how he reacted.
La la la.
So for those of you who don't know, imposter syndrome is a very common, I don't know if I'd call it disorder, phenomenon, where you doubt your own expertise even while you know you have it, and you find yourself like second guessing or worried that it's going to be judged poorly, or that, I mean, in my case, it manifests as people are going to go see through me and think I'm a fraud.
Mm.
And I get this a lot. I get it with every course I make. When I used to teach community colleges in the US, every time I got a new classroom of students, of undergrads, I would feel this.
Yeah.
And when I was teaching public speaking, this was actually really useful, because the number 1 fear in America is public speaking, and the number 2 is death. So I could say to them, look, I know a lot of you are frightened about this course. I'm terrified right now. And if I can do it, you can do it.
Which is a great intro to it.
So what are your thoughts on the thing we were just talking about?
Imposter syndrome. Hey.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that made me think about it this time round is after I'd done the UberX generator and I'd done the UV, it's a simple UV plugin thing, I was sat there and I was thinking to myself, which is a really silly thing to ask, is can I do this? Which is a completely ridiculous question because I've got evidence sat in front of me twice. Yeah, I can.
I mean, interestingly, imposter syndrome often correlates with high competency. And the reason it exists is people are aware of how much they don't know
Mm.
and how much expertise they don't have. As long as it's not crippling and you can manage it, it can be very effective. It's a great way of checking in, like, am I making assumptions? There is actually an opposite phenomena, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. The Dunning-Kruger Effect,
Yeah.
which we are all absolutely prone to, is the less you know about a subject, the higher you think your competence in it is, right? So things feel really simple from the outside. A great example of this is people who have very easy solutions to national economic crises. You know, they're not economists, or a great example will be the financial markets, right? Like looking at credit default swaps and stock markets and options and dark pools and all these other things. And it's very easy to come in and say, no, we just need to change it. That's the new rule. But the more expertise you have in that, the more you see actually that impacts this and this impacts that. And this is a little more nuanced than I thought. And maybe this is all terrible, but it's not simple. And maybe I don't understand it as well. And it's a really good idea if you find yourself talking about a subject you've never been trained in, but seems to think, am I missing something? Because the Dunning-Kruger effect can be very dangerous. Imposter syndrome, less so. I mean, it can be debilitating, but you know.
It's not dangerous outside of the person who has it, potentially.
I mean, it can mean that you never release your project.
You know,
imposter syndrome is a great way of never finishing something. It's not quite good enough yet. You know, it's
I sometimes think it's also the way that I approach things. I've been told several times in the past that I'm an incredible functional programmer rather than an object-oriented programmer, which is fine. I'm happy to be that. And I often approach my Blender scripts in a very functional manner. Hi.
Oh my God, there's Mike. Why did no one tell me?
Yeah, so I approach the scripts in a very functional manner. I will go through and I don't make any functions. I don't break things up. I literally go, right, what needs to be done? And I literally go through and almost, not exactly, because you can't always exactly do it, but I pretty much follow the steps that I would do manually and then in this automatic script. And then afterwards, I go back, and if it needs improving, I'll go back and start making those changes. And I often struggle with that particular point. At which point does it actually need improving? Because you can look at a bit of code and the script works, it's functional. And as you saw with the axe export a few moments ago, 300 axes took about 4 seconds to do. If I could make it with all the tidying up in the world, only take 3, that's not a huge change. And was it worth the time investment to make that improvement?
The one I struggle with is I'm not a programmer by training. I taught myself coding a few years ago. I made a lot of mistakes on the way. My training is in education. And I mean, I get imposter syndrome in education all the time. I know I'm a good teacher, but I also know I'm not. And I'm aware that there are plenty of other very, very talented tutorial makers and instructors out there who are incredible coders and programmers. It's very easy for me to just like compare myself to those skills and not, what's the word I want to use? Not trust the skills I actually have. And my coding is getting better. Like there's this, the stuff I made at the very beginning of discovering Godot, I wouldn't do that way now, right? I would make things a lot more object-oriented and, you know, just spread out the code and do much better job with single responsibility principles and things like that. Like I'm always improving as a coder, but it's very easy when I'm recording, especially, to look at the thing in editing and go, they're going to see through me.
It's
Every time, every time, every video, every course.
You said something in there that made me remember a Blender Nest conversation. So if you guys don't know what Blender Nest is, it's a channel on YouTube. Blender professionals gather weekly, bi-weekly, whenever we can, basically. We get together and we have a good natter about the industry, life, and everything. It's more of a podcast than anything else. You're exactly right. Learning is iterative. That's the one. Words, not my strong suit. And that we were going through, and I think it was when we were looking at portfolios and things like that. And the person asking had gone on to ArtStation, and they were just blown away by the quality of other people's work. And their work is absolutely amazing as well. But they started to have this, what's the point if there are people that are, in their perception, so much better? And we sat down, we were chatting, and it's interesting that when I look at similar amazing artwork, my initial reaction is, oh my word, that's amazing. How do I start formulating a journey to get to that ability? Even if I've got no interest in that, I want to know, what bits do I need to put together in order to get there, rather than I'm scared of that. And that's a fundamental attitude.
Here's the thing. I completely agree with everything you're saying. However, that requires you to have some level of belief in your ability in that field.
Hi, I'm Mr. Dunning.
There's a lot.
Surname Kruger.
Well, no, there's a lot of there's a lot of research that shows one of the worst things you can do to a student is to make them believe that they physically can't do something. You're not a maths person, and it's often said in a very benign way, like you're just not intrinsically good at math.
You're not cut out for this.
That, yeah. And then when they see something like that, or you're not musical, and they hear this piece of music, and at no point will they think, how do I do that? But in a field where you think you have some ability, then you start looking for the mirrors and the smoke. Then you start thinking, oh, what's that technique? And the real, I guess the superpower here is, what's the expression I heard? Almost arrogance, right? If a child can do this, I can do this, which is what I told myself when I was teaching myself Japanese online. And Japanese people thought I was genius. I'm not a genius by any definition. There are certain areas where I sound smart, but I'm a moron in plenty of areas. Like if my sink doesn't work, I just have water. But it never occurred to me that I couldn't do this. It was difficult, but it didn't occur to me. There are other fields, painting, where it never occurs to me that I could do this. So I think part of that is to get over the I'm not able to do this hump and just realize, no, you're a human being. Some people will find this easier at first, but talent isn't actually a very useful concept. It's much more useful to think this might be easier for me at first. It might be harder for me at first. But if someone else can do this, I can learn it.
To know just enough about a topic to realize that you're right.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a teacher who would say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Right? He was teaching religious studies because that's a mandatory subject in the UK. And, we covered Sikhism in 2 weeks. And he went, just so you guys know, by the way, you now have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. You think you understand this religion, you've had 2 hours instruction in it. You know just enough to make real big mistakes.
Yeah. And I remember probably about 5 years ago when I started actively coding properly. My coding journey has been a really weird one.
Mine too.
But yeah.
And actually, I think one of the big advantages I've got is the fact that I'm always questioning my own code. Is there a better way of doing this? Have I missed something? Right? As opposed to, I know what I'm doing. This is how you write it. Let me show you the one and only, the ultimate, literally ultimate platformer. Because after this one, there will be no others.
So in Blender, you can access certain areas through the Blender API. And if you decide to go, so you go, the class would be BPY, and then you go into like data objects, and you could list out the objects. That's one way of listing it out. You could go into context, and then you've got the objects. But if you actually start comparing those two lists of items, they're two separate lists. And it took me about 3 hours to work out why my script wasn't working. And I eventually went through and I debugged it line by line. I was printing out each thing I was returning each time. And then I realized these are coming back as different items. Why are they coming back as different items? I walked away, which is a very good thing to do when you're struggling. Yep. And I came back again. I was like, oh, these are the same objects in the list, but they're two complete arrays. Sorry, different thing. Wrong terminology. They're two different arrays, but they contain the same objects. So I was just like, I could have shot myself at that point.
Roderick was struggling with bi-weekly. Is it twice a week or fortnightly? And the answer is yes, depending on context. It's one of those irritating words with unhelpful meanings. My favorite ones of those are contronyms, words that are their own opposites.
Like inflammable. Is that one?
No, inflammable only means inflammable. Unflammable is not flammable. But cleave means to split asunder and to join.
I did not know that. Not the second one. I knew it was to separate.
Yep. So yeah, and contronyms, antonyms, and homonyms.
I have
this
nothing.
Feels very useful for programming.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a nice end to Imposter Syndrome. Starting talking about language. Well, I suppose coding is a language, and learning about it and its tricks and its shortcuts.
I mean, Juan a little earlier said learning is iterative.
Yeah.
Which, yes, I mean it is, right? You're always building on your own learning. But for me, the best way to learn coding, for me, is to treat it as a language, as a means of expression. For me, coding is fundamentally creative, in the same way that all the stuff I studied in my drama degree is fundamentally creative. All the stuff I did in my master's degree is fundamentally creative. It's an art form. And I don't mean art form as in it's not precise. It's not an art, it's a science. I mean, it's a way of writing a song or a poem or a painting. There isn't a right way of doing it. There are techniques that are better.
I mean,
there are techniques that will work here and not here.
Yeah, definitely.
And what I'm doing is I've got this idea for a game, or in my case, a way I want you to feel while you play, because to me, a game, as you probably know by now, is the player experience. So the code is how I express that. That's why, for me, elegance in coding is such a wonderful concept. What is the most elegant way of expressing this game? So yeah, I think the fluency model of coding, I get more fluent as I play with it, is wonderful.
Yeah, and
for others, it might help just have a very structured mathematical model of coding. Great.
I definitely approach coding from a pure problem at the moment, certainly from a pure problem solving thing, and I enjoy it because I see it as a puzzle, something to conquer, and perhaps that's part of my downfall when it comes to not necessarily wanting to refactor my code afterwards, because functionally it works. All I'm doing is I'm polishing it at that point. Maybe that doesn't apply with all my stuff.
I can see. You're right. A lot of the times you approach code, it's almost like a puzzle game. I need to get the ball over there. How do I do it?
But there's always going to be more than one way of achieving that goal as well, which is not like a puzzle.
Right. As opposed to, I want to write a game about this ball or a poem about this ball. How do I express that idea? Which is not better.
Yeah,
but it's a different model of I'm starting to sound like Foucault. It's a different way of visualizing this. That's right, models of reality. Let's go all postmodernist.
Whoosh! You join us now. We were supposed to be talking about Godot 4 and Blender 3.1 and onwards. We are now not. we're in the general chat stage of things at the moment. So yeah, another thing about coding is that there are a million ways to do something. Yes. Echoing what I just said, that's brilliant. And what makes it the right way is dependent on what you're trying to do. Yeah, I mean, I will. So in my previous life, so to speak, I operated mainly as a computer guy. I went round, fixed people's computers, help them with training, and I went into small companies and homes. And one of the things that I'd often do is I'd sit there, and I wasn't that IT guy that would. So I'm going to hold my nose here. You're doing it wrong, because they were actually achieving the goal that they were trying to achieve. Now, I did step in if I saw someone doing something that compounded mean they were wasting tens of minutes a day because they just didn't know there was another way of doing it. That was where I thought actually a beneficial knowledge here is to speed things up. And so there's always going to be multiple ways of approaching something. And I can see this, one of the solutions for having faster renders is to get better hardware. But that's expensive. It can be cost prohibitive for many, many people. The other solution is to render it and go for a short walk. Actually get exercise in and feel better on your way back. There are multiple solutions to the same project. Another quick anecdote, because I absolutely love this one. Had a lady who was absolutely really, really stressed. She had a presentation to do at work and her laptop had packed up. And of course, she's 100% focused on the laptop's not working, the laptop's not working, the laptop's not working. Where all she really needed was to go and grab the file off of the computer and just put it on a colleague's computer and run it from there. She just needed that PowerPoint presentation or whatever it happened to be. And so this is where talking through with someone else or taking a step back from the actual problem that you've got, suddenly that person can just say one thing and you're like, oh, cool. Yep. And that you can refocus and just sidestep the problem and carry on.
I mean, Anarch points out that they struggle with walking away from a problem because the tenacity and stubbornness goes over. And it's very easy, and I cover this in our Creativity for Coders course, it's very easy to get into tunnel vision. This is the one thing I'm thinking of. And the problem with tunnel vision is you don't see the periphery. And often the way you reach a solution, I'm not going to say the solution, but the way you reach a solution is by combining ideas from different areas, from different fields. My favorite example of that is the guy who came up with the model for how electrons orbit atoms, which he couldn't figure out how it works. And then he took the night off and went to the circus and saw someone spinning plates. And it just gave him a new way of conceptualizing it. And suddenly he could progress. That's not the answer. It was his way to an answer, right? And I think there's a lot of that going on. And that leads back to imposter syndrome. And it leads back to this and that. There is very rarely one answer. And while there might be wrong answers, it's usually not just one right answer. That reminds me, I used to tell my technical theatre students, the wrong answer is the one you didn't think about. And that doesn't mean everything you say is right. It means if you don't think about this in a creative process, if you just made an assumption or you've never questioned something, that's a mistake. Like that's going to come back and bite you. Every decision you make is a decision you should know you are making and have a reason why you're making it. You might regret them later, but they're not as bad as the ones you don't even realize you've made.
Yeah, I can sympathize with not being able to walk away and empathize with it. So it happened recently when writing the Python for this next section. When I was deep into the Python, I was thinking about things. I'd written quite a bit of unknown to me at the time because I was going backwards and forwards. I'd written a little bit of zombie code here and there, and it taking a step back and coming back in, I was like, oh, I don't need this bit, don't need this bit, and suddenly the code was so much cleaner after just a few minutes of break. I say a few minutes, like 90 minutes or so. Walked away and came back later. So sometimes it's best to one of my tips is to drink lots of water, and then you can't stay in one place for too long. Your bladder just won't be able to cope.
Unless you're like me, in which case you get such tunnel vision, you forget that you haven't gone up to go to the bathroom for 4 hours. You're in intense pain.
Okay, yeah, you could do that.
Right. The water thing just reminded me. I'm getting to the point where my love of history is getting in the way of enjoying video games and TV.
Where you spot problems.
Watching little clips from Game of Thrones on YouTube that just came up and it's like, I enjoyed that show. I'll watch a couple of clips for old time's sake. And I watch the Hound. He's asking for a drink, and someone gives him water. No, I'm sorry. In this setting, no one drank water. It was poison. Everyone knew water made you sick, and they were right. They drank ale. Like, water would kill you.
I'm going to perpetuate that myth even to today.
The one that I was playing Skyrim, and I was walking down the street, like down the country road between two towns, and this lizard lady came up to me and said, "Good day, Sirrah." So I stabbed her, because Sirrah is a killing insult. Sir would be a term of address. Sirrah is the same as walking past somebody and saying, "Hello, boy." Now, I know that's not what they intended, but my knowledge of history just gets in the way.
Have you been playing any new games recently?
No, I've been playing a little bit of Ark, but that's about it recently. How about you?
I reloaded after many, many months Kerbal Space Program, and they've done a load of updates to it. So I started right back at the beginning, and I'd lost all of the sort of previous knowledge. They've done loads of things that are really, really good, because they've taken what others have made as mods and incorporated them into the game. So things like Delta V is how much energy basically you've got. And in a vacuum, it's exactly the same. If you're in an atmosphere, it can go down. And I'm like, oh yeah, it takes, I think it's like 2,000 meters per second of Delta V to orbit the planet you start on. So I set up this rocket with 2,500, forgetting the fact that when you start at sea level, you've got all this atmosphere to get through. Splosh. Splosh. And I did exactly what...
So you made a catapult.
I made a very expensive catapult. And then I got into orbit and I ran out of fuel just as I reached the right height. So I've now got this Kerbal.
Oh no.
Because I love playing with persistent playthroughs. I've now got Jebediah, which is the expert pilot. You get extra features with him, like stabilizing. So I've now got to mount a rescue mission to get him down from orbit and hopefully not leave another Kerbal in orbit.
An arrow to the knee was an old Slavic euphemism to getting hitched. I mean, that makes more sense. I used to be an adventurer until I got married. Makes a lot more sense to me. No, it's interesting. Like the more because I like to listen to books like The Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England and the Republic of Pirates, and I'm fascinated by history. I just like reading it and listening to it. The problem is, the more I listen to living history books, and that's history about, I say listen to because I usually have them on my headphones as I'm going for a walk or I'm doing the dishes or whatever. Living history is the history about what it is to live in that time. What do you wear? What do you eat? How do you tell the time? What's the currency? The more you know about stuff like that, the more medieval games and so on just feel like you've walked into Renfest. It's perfectly fine, but don't tell me it's accurate. It's
setting an expectation. If they're trying to be realistic and it's not, it's a problem.
I feel like what I imagine an astrophysicist watching Star Trek must feel like.
Or Star Wars.
Yeah, just like, we've reversed the polarity.
Cool. You turned a magnet around.
Exactly. Like, how does that...
That's like saying, so we've put it in reverse. Beep.
Reverse the polarity. Beep. Beep.
Yeah, we put the warning in so we knew when we were reversing.
All right. Do we need to start wrapping this up?
I think so. I think we've got... Oh, blimey. Yes, we've got a little bit over the hour already. That's perfect. So,
all right. Let's go into the black hole. Yeah.
It's a great idea. So,
I mean, in theory, once you reach the event horizon, you will break time.
On black holes, so I don't know, obviously no one knows this, but if you had a black hole that was large enough, crossing the event...
Dunning-Kruger time.
Yep. Dunning-Kruger time. We should have a section. Mike talks Dunning-Kruger for 5 minutes. But in theory, you can have a black hole...
Chatting, absolutely.
You can have a black hole large enough that you can cross the event horizon and not feel anything. Because you're so far away from its center The gravity.
Isn't that what an event horizon is? The point where that's no longer true.
You no longer feel anything.
Also, if you cross the event horizon, doesn't personal time stop?
Well, it just means the point at which light can no longer escape.
Right. But if light can't escape, then that breaks time. From what I understand, Dunning-Kruger time.
Oh yeah, it inverts the Penrose diagram thingy.
Yes, no, Black Sails was the name of it, Pagosh. I actually watched 2 or 3 episodes of it. It was like,
Black Sails. I've actually been watching more episodes on like Netflix and Amazon Prime recently than I've done in the past. And there's been a load of things released recently. I'm like, oh, they're back. Like there's another.
Yeah. Upload is back.
Yes.
The Boys is coming back.
I've started rewatching The Boys. My partner didn't get on with it, so I was like, well, I'll just watch it. And I heard about the new one coming out. I was like, yeah, I can build up to that.
I have a hit and miss thing with it. Like, I find the really over-the-top goriness a little annoying because I have a habit of watching that while I'm eating, and I have a quite graphic imagination. And there's nothing like making a spaghetti bolognese, switching it on and going...
I mean, they didn't hide the fact it was going to be graphic, even in the first episode.
Hello, Miranda. But yeah, I think... I mean, I don't know. I haven't been into a black hole. I don't know how it works.
I've not done it recently.
From what I understand, it will shatter every piece of you at a different rate, but you won't experience time. So if you shatter in a forest and time doesn't pass, did I really happen?
Are we talking about a bear in the woods? Got to be careful what you say there, yeah. We're slowly creeping off out of the frame, you know.
We are. We should be doing the thing. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, thoughts, interpretive dances, or jingles before we go?
Very
nice.
Thank you. We should totally.
Baboon's better than weasel.
We still need to do our a cappella album. We've been threatening it for 4 years now. 3 years? Right. 4 years? I don't know.
Yes, unless our demands are met, we will do an a cappella.
Oh, it'd be fantastic.
So back when I used to work in finance, I was in the New York office, and they wanted me to...
Oh, was that a band?
Yeah. And they wanted me to lead an introduction to a training session I was going to have to do with the London office. So the entire company's on the call, and they hand over to me. And I say, good evening. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jan. And unless my demands are met, I will destroy one major I'm so sorry. This is the wrong speech. I thought that was really funny. The people in New York thought that was really funny. The people in London did not think that was funny at all. And the CEO was grumpy pants. When can we have the complete RPG bundle? As soon as we can. Mikey's doing wonderful work with the Blender and the courses. The music course is done.
Yep.
The Godot course is going to take a lot longer because Godot 4 is still in alpha and is not stable yet. But the moment we get to a point where we are comfortable saying, yes, we can teach you this because it's not going to crash every 3 seconds and they're not changing every week, then we will start on it.
And that goes with the assets as well. Once Godot 4 is stable, we'll be able to actually release the assets that work fully and properly with Godot.
Right. We mentioned this earlier in the stream, but right at the beginning of last week, they released Alpha 4 and broke all textures. So I had to go through and redo them because they changed the naming. And things like that are going to keep happening. So at this point, it's not ready for production.
Of either courses for it or working in it.
But thank you. That was a good question. Any other good questions or bad ones? For those of you who weren't here at the beginning, Mikey will be away next week, so there will be no stream. He's going on vacation.
Well done,
Mikey.
Yeah, I booked a vacation 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
I thought I need a vacation. 2 years later.
And then there was this global no travel thing.
Yep.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think
cool. I'm just having a look at the. Yes, it's okay. I'm just having a look
Yeah.
at my diary and checking on things. There'll be another break in transmission the 11th, but we'll remind you about that closer to the time. So that's fine.
Yeah. Juan asks Vegas. Yes, thank you. That'd be lovely. When do we go? Here is a question. Did you guys do something for your infrastructure, auto builds or similar? I don't.
No, is the short
No.
answer.
We use Git internally, and every course or so, I realize I don't know how to use Git, and I break everything, and Mikey has to listen to me complain. But no, we're not yet at the stage where we are big enough to be doing that kind of infrastructure investments.
No,
I think is the short answer.
Yeah. I've in terms of infrastructure, I've got inside the house. I've got a NAS. Everything's all linked together that way. Externally, that's
Rapper?
something like that. But externally, Yan gets that to me on Drive. We did actually start to use my NAS exposed to the internet, but it turns out that the guide that I used to do that,
massive security flaw.
you don't do that anymore. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm taking the NAS offline.
Roderick, some random fun fact for us. Did you know that when Shakespeare was alive, theatre was not an art form and was in fact illegal within the wards of the City of London? It was very, very low class entertainment, not art. And if you're a respectable middle class woman who wants to go to the theatre, you wear a mask to protect your reputation.
Cool.
Miranda, is it bad practice to use a lot of singletons on Godot? Yes, use them only when you need to. Otherwise, you've got everything able to alter a variable that's in one place, and it's really hard to keep track of what's doing what. So when you start getting bugs, everything sort of spaghetti's out of control. So if you need to use a singleton or an auto load or a global, by all means do so. But if you don't need to do it, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you started describing that, I was like, that just sounds like general advice for a global, global anything.
Yeah, it's a variable that can be accessed by anything, which sometimes is very important and very useful, but it's very tempting to make everything a global, and that's one of the big mistakes you can make right at the beginning.
Keeping things in scope is so useful.
It just means that there's no. Well, it's not even just keeping them in scope. It's really easy to introduce bugs and not know where they're from, because everything can change everything else. So you really want to keep a single responsibility principle going. This function only does one thing. This node only does one thing. This variable is only accessible by this node unless there's a good reason why not.
Yeah, getting used to a workflow with small enough commits on different branches is hard, but well worth it. So I actually do use branching in Git. I find it's incredibly useful for prototyping ahead and then being able to reset the project back again and try different things out. So I tend to use Git more in a production for the course itself, and actually when I'm recording the course, then keeping track of code. But I do the plugin that I've written. Now that I'm doing the second pass of it, I'll often not put something into Git until the basic first pass has gone, and then I can start keeping track of the changes. Because the moment I start making those changes, that's usually when I start introducing bugs and things suddenly not working. And then you can just go, well, I've just done this thing, and then you try a load of things to try and fix it. You're like, aha, I fixed it, but I've broken several other things as well. I know what I'll do: stash the changes, revert the file, and you're back, and you can just carry on.
I use a lot of branching in Git, but I never mean to, and I never know how to undo it. Miranda, is using a singleton for trigger UI panels. So if you're using, let's say, a save file to keep track of what the options the player used last time or what level they're on, that's a great time to use a singleton. Because then that save file just changes one thing, and then if things need to get to it, they can. If that UI panel is things like, are we in full screen? And you need to keep checking that, then yes, that should be in a singleton. But if you don't need to do that, if you don't need to keep track of this information in between nodes in a way that isn't as simple as just doing a signal or making a node somewhere, then if you need to do that, use a singleton. If you don't need to do that, don't, is my answer. The more you can get into the habit of making it very easy for you to create this system with whatever system it is without resorting to a singleton, the easier your life will be over time. But there are times when a singleton is a great idea. For example, I want the game to remember that Mikey likes to play this on full screen. So next time you open on full screen. And if he changes it, just change that. So I've got my save file that's being accessed through a singleton, and that singleton just handles the save file for me.
So branches. So with Git, you can basically create an alternative timeline. So a great example, I'll also answer the undo as well, just underneath. So if I'm creating a course or anything that requires steps to follow one after the other, being able to revert back to the last thing I did when recording something is so valuable, because if I screw up in the middle of a lecture, I can literally go, okay, stop recording, press reset, basically either stashing or deleting anything that's changed, and then carrying on. Alternatively, when it comes to branching, if I need to come off and try some stuff, if I'm not recording, as in not doing a production, then I can just merge that back into the main flow if it's actually worked without destroying the original code. Or if it comes to production, I often branch off to try prototypes or just different ideas or different ways of doing things. Going right back to earlier on when we were talking about there are many different ways of doing something, I will often, let's say I need to make a Mayan pyramid or a bridge or an archway or something like that. There's loads of different ways you could do that. You could do it in code. You could do it with a path, with an array modifier and a curve modifier. You could just place them there manually. Each have, and now you can use geometry nodes. There's so many different ways you could approach that. And in that example, I might branch out and record the individual steps I've done, and then look back at that branch later on and see the flow. This one took 5 major points, so that would be 5 lectures if I was teaching it, but this one was only 2. And because for the scope of the course, we try and keep things as succinct as possible without having to teach a load of little things to do the same thing that would take 2, I can look at those visually and say, right, we're going to go this way because that gives me another 3 lectures of budget to actually finish off that particular section. So again, I'm using Git for non-code as well as for code. Now,
and I'm using it as a way of getting Mikey to see the stuff I'm making and my students to see what the code looked like. Never learned Git. I just press the button.
We'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, squashing commits. I do that all the time. That doesn't help with me if I need those individual points, because they'll be specific and critical points. But I've squashed things as well. Like you were saying there, I did like 6 things the other day to my code, and I had 6 commits one after the other because I didn't want to accidentally break something and have to come back again. I used it as a safety net, which I suppose that's kind of what it's there for as well. And then after I'd finished that, the whole purpose of those 6 commits was to do X. I just squashed them and renamed that particular commit.
Right. Meanwhile, I think that brings us to the end of our thing, because we've gone almost half an hour over. We were worried we wouldn't have enough to talk about. We waffled. Did good. I seem to be reversed, because I'm looking away from you, but it says I'm looking towards you.
Yeah. You just flip your camera. That's what I do.
I'm not sure how that helps.
Perfect.
I used to be a professor, you know.
All
right.
At Clown College.
Actually, I did teach clowning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We had a lovely time. Thank you for the jelly and the ice cream. Thank you, Mikey, for being so patient.
You're welcome. And we'll see you not next week, but the week after. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Present.
I'm violently shaking. I can't reach the end button. There we go.